All eyes were riveted on him. Then he stepped around the podium and walked up to the very edge of the stage. Betsy saw the cameramen far back in the room suddenly adjust their cameras to follow Grant. She glanced back at him, confused, knowing he couldn't possibly read the teleprompter from there. What was he doing? He folded his hands in front of him, straightened his posture, and lifted his head. I lied to get elected. There was no shame or apology in his tone of voice. A murmur began in the room, and for a moment Grant said nothing more. Betsy had been all ready to hear that finely polished inaugural speech, and this certainly wasn't it. Of course, Grant continued, holding up his hand to silence the crowd, lying to get elected doesn't make me any different from anyone else who has acquired a position of power in this government. Betsy scanned the faces of the congressmen, many of whom were now whispering among themselves. There were some looks of anger, some of nervousness, and some of complete bafflement. The words he was saying did not compute. It didn't sound like a joke, nor did it sound like a confession. What was Grant doing? I didn't come here to talk to these crooks, Grant said with a dismissive wave of his hand toward the hundreds of senators and representatives before him. Then he pointed up toward the TV cameras and civilian spectators in the back of the room. I came here with a message for you. At this, there was much clamor and movement among the congressmen, but given the situation, it seemed that none of them dared to stand up or openly protest. All politicians lie, Grant continued. You know that. But there is something very different about me and something very different about today. He paused again for a moment, scanning the faces before him. You see, every other politician lies and promises to take care of you and fight for you and give you goodies in order to trick you into giving him power. But despite the noble intentions they put on for show, all politicians have only one goal, to be the ones holding the reins of this control machine. Betsy didn't dare to believe what she was hearing. Was this really happening? Grant was always good at using attention-grabbing tricks, but this didn't seem like a trick. He spoke now, not in the usual pompous, elitist politician tone, but like a man who meant what he was saying. Well, not me, he continued. Unlike everyone else who holds high office here, I didn't climb my way here with all the usual lies, empty promises, backroom deals, and other scheming in order to acquire power for myself. For a moment, Betsy thought maybe he would segue into a sermon about honest government, but then he went on. No, I didn't come here to seize the power for myself. I came here to destroy it. At this, the entire room broke into a murmur. Shut up, came Grant's booming but controlled voice, and the noise level in the room dropped to almost nothing. I have a few things to tell you that you probably aren't going to want to hear. Shut up and listen. A brief giggle involuntarily burst out of Betsy's mouth. This was unbelievable. Not exactly presidential, she thought, but she was starting to enjoy herself. 14 years ago, the president continued, a friend of mine bet me $2 million that I couldn't become a U.S. senator. And when this guy bet $2 million, he meant it. We had always talked about whether it was possible to infiltrate this little tyrannical club called the United States government and strangle the abomination from the inside. He said it wasn't. I said it was. 5 years later, I was a state senator in Pennsylvania running for United States Congress. He paused and looked down at his feet. That's when I heard that my friend had been murdered. He paused again. You see, my friend was fighting tyranny from the outside, which is a dangerous thing to do. He was using his connections and his money to expose the political crooks of this town for what they are. Needless to say, the control freaks here didn't take kindly to that. So the FBI made up a false charge, and when they went to get my friend, he wouldn't surrender, so they killed him. His expression was determined and unflinching. It didn't make the news. After that, I kept going with the bet, not for the money anymore, but for my friend. I swore to myself, even if it took the patience of Job, that I would get so deep into the beast that I could reach its heart. And here I am. He held his arms wide, and the murmur began again. This time he ignored it. To get right to the point, he went on, letting his arms drop to his sides, this thing you call government, this God that you pray to solve all the problems in your life, this pretended protector and savior, this stinking heap of anti-human oppression that you so eagerly subjugate yourselves to. If anything was ever the epitome of pure evil, this is it. Trouble is, most of you are too stupid to see it. You still worship it, pay tribute to it, and allow it to chain you, shackle you, control you, and monitor you. Instead of thinking for yourselves, you're constantly clamoring for some new leader to save and protect you. Your cowardice and irresponsibility built this monster. It commands and you obey like good little slaves. And worst of all, you hold up your unthinking obedience as a virtue. You believe it makes you good people. It doesn't. It makes you stupid robots. Betsy's attention was on the rows and rows of representatives, many of whom were now looking around the room nervously. A few were trying to be discreet while frantically whispering into their cell phones, and 2 or 3 looked as if they were about to walk out. Well, I'm here to rudely foist freedom upon you, whether you want it or not. I'm going to tell you things you don't want to hear. I'm going to do things you don't want me to do. You don't have to worry too much, however, because I won't be in office long, and once I'm gone, I'm sure most of you will scramble back into slavery and government worship as quickly as you possibly can. You'll eagerly flock to the next lying politician who promises to take care of you, throw away your freedom to the next political con man who promises you security, and you will reap the rewards of your own ignorance. I can't save you from your addiction to subservience, and I don't intend to try. But there are some of us, however few, who actually want freedom, who would rather face an uncertain world as responsible adults than live as slaves in a cage. And now we're going to do it. As for the rest of you, all you have to do is stay out of our way. If you insist on putting shackles on yourselves, be my guest, but you will no longer put them on those of us who choose to be free. Now it's time for a little irony. You believe that by pushing buttons in voting booths, you give certain people the right to rule you. In reality, I have no more right to rule any of you now than I did yesterday. I'm still only human. Yet, for some reason, you accept it as undeniable gospel that governments have the right to rule you, that the Constitution gives moral permission for these liars and thieves to meddle in your lives, he said, gesturing at the congressman sitting in front of him. You accept that they own you and have the right to take what you produce, to tell you what you may and may not do, and to tell you what you must do. You refuse to see the truth, that neither constitutions nor voting booths nor legislative rituals can give anyone the right to rule you. You own yourselves, but most of you don't even want to. You feel more comfortable being the property of politicians. Well, now I'm going to use your blind faith in this enslavement system against you. From the expression she saw in the crowd, Betsy knew that at that point, many of the politicians there would have loved nothing more than to forcibly drag Grant off the stage. And if he was anyone other than the President of the United States, they probably would have done it. As newly elected chief executive officer of this bizarre power cult, Grant went on, my first act will be to sign these pieces of paper. He walked over to the lectern, leaned down behind it, and brought out a bunch of papers and held them above his head. By the power vested in me by your insane belief in authority, he said, setting the papers on the lectern and writing on them, I am hereby firing every employee of the IRS, the ATF, the DEA, the TSA, the CIA, the NSA, the ICE, most of the FBI, and a bunch of other federal agencies, some of which you've never even heard of. These executive orders are all perfectly legal for those of you who believe in that sort of thing. A confused murmur arose again in the crowd. Some faces were openly angry, many were confused, but Betsy noticed, with some surprise, one elderly congressman grinning widely. While we're at it, he continued, leaning down and hoisting a huge box from behind the lectern, letting it slam onto the floor in front of him. Here are 1 million or so presidential pardons for all those now in federal prison for tax crimes or on drug charges or weapons charges. Basically, anyone who's been locked up for a victimless crime, which includes most federal inmates. I'll be signing all of these in the coming days. The murmur rose to a dull roar. Shut up, Grant boomed. I'm not finished. Jessica sat in stunned silence as the fading lamplight lit the other 5 shining, sweaty faces around the damp cellar. All eyes were wide, mouths open, as the small group listened to the new president addressing the nation. It's pathetic how you people still imagine this to be a free country. The voice was slightly distorted and accompanied by significant white noise, but was easy enough to understand. There's hardly a single thing or activity left in this country that the parasites haven't gotten their tentacles into. You can't lift a finger without government permission, without them taking a cut. The kid who sells lemonade in his front yard is breaking 6 different laws. You can't produce anything, sell anything, trade anything, or build anything without paying fee after fee, jumping through hoop after hoop, filling out this form and that form, getting this license and that permit, going through all the inspections, groveling before regulators, and then hoping that whatever moronic bureaucrat you end up with decides to give you his holy permission to do what you had the God-given right to do to begin with. And you call yourselves free? God, is this for real? Doug whispered and was instantly shushed by everyone else in the room. USA, we're number 1, came the voice from the radio in an obviously mocking tone. Hooray for the pathetic, washed-up, hypocritical, falling-apart slave state that is the United States of America. Exactly what is it about this sheep pasture that you think is still worth celebrating? What the hell do you think that flag represents anymore? What the hell are you proud of? Proud to live in the country with the most intrusive, obnoxious, abusive tax collectors in the world? Proud to live in a country that has a higher percentage of people in prison than any other country in the world? Proud to be ruled by a government that has started and perpetuated more military conflicts in more areas of the world than any other in history? Proud to live in a country where the politicians and bankers have seen to it that you, your children, and your children's children will forever be their indentured servants, to be forever herded and fleeced like sheep? Proud to live in a country where the biggest slimeballs on the planet tell you what you can eat, what you can drink, what you can drive, what you can build, where you can work, what you can produce, and what you can think? Did you know about this, David? Asked Jason. No, of course not. Be quiet, came the response. The radio voice went on. When July 4th rolls around and you're all swigging your beer and waving your flags, does the fact that we are infinitely less free than we ever were under British rule ever make its way into what's left of your brains? Hooray, the land of the free, where half of what you earn gets swiped by politicians, where you fall for every crisis the liars in D.C. throw at you. They create problem after problem: war, recession, terrorism, poverty, crime, disease, environmental disaster. And you are such well-trained sheep that time and time again you demand your own enslavement as the solution. 200 years ago, Benjamin Franklin told you that those who would choose temporary security over essential liberty deserved neither. Well, you did, and now you have neither, and it's just what you deserve. You look to the biggest crooks in the world to be your all-powerful saviors, and now you are paying the price. I know firsthand how easy you are to deceive and manipulate. You elected me because I pitched the same lies all the parasites in this town do, only I did it more convincingly and with a slightly slicker presentation. I promised to save you from the economic depression that the government caused. I promised to save you from the wars that the government caused. I promised to save you from the crime that the government caused. I promised to save you from the terrorism that the government caused. I promised you, if you would just accept me as your master and give me control of your lives, that I would save you from all the scary things that you could imagine, real or made up. I used the same lies and deceptions that every politician does. I just did it a little better than the others this time. And while I was duping you, I was also convincing the powers that be, the people who run this whole show behind the scenes, that I would make a good stooge for them, that I would be a good puppet and dance to their tune. Otherwise, I never would have even been on the ballot. You voted for me because it comforts you to have someone tell you that if you'll only bow to him and give him unlimited power, he will make all your problems go away. That is the lie you always fall for, that if you just find the right leader, he can make the world a safe, happy place. But that's never their intention, and that's never what they do. They make the world a scary, dangerous place to ensure that you will forever remain dependent upon them and their so-called solutions. And you keep applauding them as they commit the worst of atrocities based on what they say are the best of motives. And what about you, my fellow Americans? What are your motives? You pretend that the things you ask of government, you ask from the best of intentions. You only want to feed the poor, to protect the innocent, to punish the wicked. Or so you say. But if your intentions are indeed so pure and noble, why is it that you fail to notice the damage done by the government's so-called solutions? Haven't you noticed what government welfare has done to the poor, reducing millions of people to stupid empty shells without purpose and without hope? Haven't you noticed that the government schools crank out millions of ignorant kids whose one lasting talent is the ability to mindlessly do as they're told? Haven't you noticed that the government's economic solutions, from socialist redistribution to the fraudulent banking system and its fake money, have impoverished this once prosperous nation? Haven't you noticed that everything the government touches turns to shit? If your motives are pure, why have you not noticed that every time you entrust these challenges to rulers and masters, they end up enslaving the poor, oppressing the innocent, and empowering the wicked? Are you just profoundly unobservant, or is it something worse than that? Could it be that your desire to help others and to fix society is outweighed by your desire to escape the uncertainties and responsibilities of living life as a free human being? Is that why you keep voting for whoever pretends he can save you from reality and magically save you from whatever the future might hold? Why else would you continue to fall for the patently ridiculous lies that all of the politicians keep telling? In your lifetime, every election has been nothing more than that, a contest to choose the better liar. None of them ever meant a word they said. They all had one goal, to rule you, but you never caught on. They kept feeding you a choice between two slimeball crooks, one colored red and one colored blue. And you kept proving that you were too stupid to see through the scam. You kept advocating your own enslavement, unable to comprehend the possibility that you might have the power to do something other than just choosing one of two tyrants to run your lives. Let me make this perfectly clear. If you voted for me or for my opponent, you're a gullible idiot. You fell for the same tyrant tricks that the megalomaniacs of the world have been using for thousands of years. And I'm not expecting to talk you out of your illusions here. These days, I'd be more likely to get converts out of a herd of lemmings than out of the American public. No, I'm not here to stop you from enslaving yourselves. I'm here to stop you from enslaving that minuscule minority of Americans who still understand what freedom is and who still yearn for it. Amazingly, despite the constant authoritarian indoctrination cranked out by the so-called education system and the media in this country, there are still a few people here who value freedom. You've heard of them. They're the people you love to despise and insult. They're the kooks, the extremists, the people who won't get with the program or go with the flow. They're the black sheep whom you look upon with scorn for wanting to step out of the shearing line. They don't fit in. They're the lunatic fringe. They're not like you. No, they're not like you. They dare to state the truth. You don't. They can think, and you can't. Every inch of progress in history has been their doing, and they've had to constantly fight upstream against all the insults, condemnation, and outright violence which the dull-witted majority made up of people like you has thrown at them. They ended slavery while people like you sat idle. No, it wasn't that fascist Lincoln. They put an end to women being treated like animals while people like you called them names. They spoke out against the injustices of regime after regime, while the supposedly good citizens just quietly did as they were told. They resisted the warmongering of this country and countless others, while people like you either condoned or turned a blind eye to mass murder. They put themselves in harm's way for the sake of truth and justice, while people like you quietly avoided making waves. No, they are not like you, those extremists and radicals. They have taken on the responsibility of being human beings, while you have remained content to be stupid animals. In the dimness of the cellar, all eyes had been glued to the radio, as if there was something to see there. Jessica glanced over at David. His head was bowed and his eyes were closed, a smile on his face and tears rolling down his cheeks. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she felt a twinge of hope. Jason had just heard the President of the United States fire him and every other ATF agent.